We are so happy that you are here. This event today is sponsored by Cox Business, and I want to post a link in chat in just a minute. You might not be aware that Cox Small Business is also offering internet services, phone, very affordable rates for women entrepreneurs. So they're our sponsor, and we're very grateful that they have sponsored us and brought you this programming here today. With that, let's do a little bit of introductions. Our chapter leader team is here. Part of our chapter leader team is here. And we have a very special guest for you today to talk about branding. So I am Deb Boulanger, if we don't know each other. And if you are new to Ellevate, if this is your first Ellevate Roundtable, please type new in chat. We want to shout out and welcome you. Also feel free to post what is your business. So post just a one-liner on who do you serve, what do you offer, so that we can get to know you as well. My name is Deb Boulanger. I am the CEO of The Great Do-Over. I'm a business coach for women who are making the leap from corporate leader to entrepreneur. They want to replace that paycheck they've left behind and make revenue growth predictable in their businesses. And I am joined today by Elizabeth Ice, who's a chapter leader as well. Elizabeth, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm so glad to see this crowd of people that just keeps growing and this community that we're building. And I'm Elizabeth Ice, and I am the founder and CEO of Results Resourcing. And we're a freelance staffing platform that comes with your own recruiter. So we basically match solopreneurs, small businesses with vetted virtual freelancers so you can outsource work you don't want to do so you can scale your business by focusing on delivering value to your clients. And let me also introduce Sarah as a chapter leader for this group. And Sarah, turn it over to you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I'm Sarah O'Brien Hammond. So excited to see so many familiar faces, some new faces out there. Thanks for joining us today in what I know will be a really informative conversation. If you don't have your journal already or a pad of paper, grab it, because I'm sure Hillary is going to be sharing some information that you do not want to miss. So, grab whatever you need. I am a career coach who works with women at career crossroads. I help women ditch the hustle and grind mentality and achieve success differently. So thanks so much for being here today. Really excited to see you all. Is that our leadership team in attendance, Deb? Is that everybody? Did we hit everybody? Can't see.
Yeah, Simone and Ruchi and Kalpa are not here today, but we have a very fabulous leadership team, and you'll get to meet more of them as you come back week after week.
Thanks, Deb. I can't see all the screens here on my phone. But welcome again, and we are so excited. We have Hillary Kakalis here with us today. Hillary is the founder and chief go-getter at Sipwell Wine Co. Hillary has had a successful career in the consumer goods space on both the corporate and the agency side. She knows a thing or two about branding, ladies. And, as entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, we are the CMO. We are the chief branding officer. We are the everything, and it can get super overwhelming. It's really hard to figure it all out on our own. So these conversations, I know for me, are ones that I really have my ear to the ground listening to, because I want to drink up everything as the chief everything. So Hillary, thank you so much for being here today with us at Ellevate.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for the great introduction. Excited to be here. Excited to Ellevate for inviting me. And I am excited to talk to you all about building a brand. I'm going to share my screen. I've got a presentation up. And yes, please feel free to take notes, jot things down. We are planning, I can share these slides after the presentation, so you don't feel like you need to write everything down. But yeah, so as Sarah mentioned, my background is, can everyone see my slides, by the way, before I get
Yes.
going? Good,
Yep.
good to go. Okay. My background is in consumer goods. I am the founder of Sipwell Wine Company. We make premium, sustainable canned wine. This is my first entrepreneurial venture, but before this, my career has been in brand marketing. I was the head of marketing at a craft brewery named Ballast Point, based in San Diego. I'm based in San Diego. And I have also been a brand strategist for consumer brands, primarily in food and beverage. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means, what it means to build a brand. How do you do it? How do you build a brand platform? I'm going to go through each of the steps that I typically do when I'm working with brands, and also as I built the Sipwell brand. So I'm going to go through each step, and then I'm going to show you what that looks like for Sipwell so that you have a real world example. I recognize that not everyone here, in fact, the majority of people here are not in consumer goods, don't have consumer businesses, but I think the lessons and the questions you ask yourself as you build a brand are applicable across industries, especially for many of you who you are the brand. It's your services, it's your talents. I think there are still really important elements to this that you can apply to building a brand for your business. The other thing I would say is I think it's a good thing to kind of think of it with a consumer lens on, because you do have consumers, you have customers. So it may not be a wine or a snack or something you get in a grocery store, but there's still an element of needing to appeal and give a message to somebody who can relate to you and want to use your services and your brand. So that's what I'll say as I dive in. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat. We're going to save time for the end for Q&A, and I'm just going to go through these slides, but excited to talk through this with you all and then open it up for some good discussion. So the first question is, what is a brand? And that might seem fairly obvious. I think most people would say it's your logo. The first thing people think of when they think of a brand is it's a logo. It's the Nike swoosh. It's the Starbucks mermaid. It's, the Apple on the front of your computer. But really, there are so many more elements that go into making a strong brand. Yes, it's a logo, but it's your personality, your brand's personality. It's the tone of voice that you use in your copy and your marketing communications. It's the people behind the brand, especially if you are a people-focused, service-focused brand. It is, even other visual elements beyond the logo. It's your fonts that you choose, the colors that you choose, what type of photography you use, what your tagline is, how your website looks, the values and the mission that you communicate through who you are, the partnerships that you choose to partner with other companies and other brands. All of that makes up an entire brand universe and makes a holistic view of who a brand is and what they're all about. And so what's important is, as you're thinking of building a brand, you need to take the step back to answer a lot of these questions of what is my brand, what does it represent, before making these decisions about what the logo looks like or what colors you should use or how you should build your website. So here's a quick visual. This is Sipwell, again, as a consumer product, this is my brand. This can of wine is our brand. It is the package, it's what people see on the shelf. But there are so many decisions that went into what this even looks like. The names that we choose for our wines, Tiny Victories, Rocksteady, Go Getter, High Point, those are all part of this brand that we are trying to create. The colors we choose, the logo and the design for the logo, even the style of photography with the bright yellow background, all of that comes together to form a feeling that you get when you look at it before you even try the wine or touch it. It's there's a holistic element to how to put a brand together. And this is a beautiful, nice, shiny picture, but there were a lot of steps that I took to get to this place before even producing this that I'm going to walk you through now. And that is around building a brand platform. So when I say brand platform, this, especially if you go to an agency to ask for somebody to do this, this can be kind of a little bit of insider baseball in the branding space. I can tell you that big companies pay big agencies lots of money for this type of information, for a group of strategists like me to sit around and create this for them. I am kind of giving you the playbook of how they do that, so that you don't have to pay somebody a lot of money to do it. And the reality is you can do it yourself if you ask the right questions and you really think about who you want the brand to be, and what you want it to represent. And so the brand platform, it can be a document. I've seen it and I've presented it as a PowerPoint presentation. Really, it's a series of elements that you should think through before you make any of those other brand decisions. And the elements that I like to use in a brand platform are listed here. The first is brand equities. So this would be the competitive strengths for your brand. So the things that you talk about that are the things you hang your hat on for what you do and who you are. Then it's brand personality. And these truly are personality traits. If your brand were a person, how would you describe their personality? Third element is brand pillars. I like to use the word pillars because for me, these are foundational elements. This is how you build the house on top of it. These are the core values, the core tenets that build the direction for your brand. The fourth element of it is a positioning statement. This is your elevator pitch. It's a paragraph or two. It's who you are in a nutshell that captures all of those things I mentioned above into one concise pitch. The fifth piece of it is a brand promise, which is really the contract you're making with your customer. What does that person expect to get from your brand every single time you interact with them? And then the last piece is the brand essence. Brand essence is kind of the insider branding term for it. A lot of times this becomes the tagline for your company. This is public facing. This is, just do it for Nike. So what I'm going to do now is walk you through how to come up with each of these elements of the brand platform, and then show you, for Sipwell at least, what that looks like. So the first piece of it is equities. And as I mentioned, an equity is a competitive strength for your brand. It's often a functional benefit or an emotional benefit or a unique attribute. So, again, if we're in the food space, it's that your food is organic. If you're a coach, it's that you have X years of experience in that field. So the things that you hang your hat on, that you talk about when you talk about your brand, your product, your services. And for each of these elements, I gave a definition, and then I'm giving some questions that you can ask yourself as you do this exercise. So the first being, what do you hang your hat on when you talk about your brand? What are the 2 or 3 main communication points? If someone were to interview you about what makes your brand special, what are the first 2 or 3 things you say? Those for sure would be up there in terms of brand equities. Second is, do you offer something that none or very few of your competitors do? A key element of determining your brand equity is determining how you stand apart from everybody else. The third piece of it is, do you have any proprietary methods or ingredients or things that are, trade secrets or unique to you? Again, if you're a product, this is, the recipe for Coca-Cola. But if you offer a service, perhaps you've got a particular framework that you've trademarked that you are giving to people. Anything proprietary or that you yourself own is a clear equity for the brand. The fourth piece of it is, do you have a public-facing founder or a public face for your brand? Again, for a lot of people, I believe on this call, you are the brand. And so the number one equity for your brand is yourself. So making sure that that's listed as well. And then the last question to ask yourself as you're thinking about this is, what's the number one thing your customers say about you and your brand? What's the number one thing that you hear in feedback over and over again? If they're telling it back to you, then that's an equity that you can use to communicate your brand to somebody else. And so here's an example for Sipwell, what our equities are. And they're listed, I don't have them bulleted, but they're listed top to bottom. I won't read them through them all, but we start with the fact that we're premium award-winning wine sourced from California's Central Coast. We use organically and sustainably farmed grapes. All of our wines are in aluminum cans. We do have a proprietary carbonation method. So instead of carbonating our sparkling wines with just CO2, we do it via fermentation. So for that, that's a proprietary thing that we can hang our hat on that no one else can do. Our wines are 0 sugar. We are woman-owned and minority-owned. We're local, at least to Southern California. So you can see here, again, in the consumer space, they're very factual elements, but they're the things that when we talk about the brand, we talk about as things that stand out among our competitors. The next element of a brand platform is the personality. This is always a fun exercise because the number one thing I think is, if your brand were a person, how would you describe them? If your brand were your friend, what would you talk about? It's very much how to describe the brand in personality terms and human terms. And the reason we do this exercise is because it helps you as you're doing copywriting, as you're figuring out the visual identity for your brand. If your brand is fun and cheerful, but you've got very stark black and white visuals, that doesn't necessarily translate. Or, if you are about empathy in your coaching, but your copy is very dry and factual, they don't connect. And so it's important to really think through the personality, because that is a lot of this intangible that you want to come through in the more tangible elements. And so when you do a personality exercise, like I said, the number one question is, if this were a person, if this were your friend, how would you describe them? Second question I like to ask the brands I work with a lot to help wrap your head around it: is there a celebrity or public figure who you think embodies your brand? Again, if your brand is you, if you're building a personal brand, you're pulling from your own personality in a lot of ways. But if it's not, or if it's something else, it's helpful to have an analog to pull from. Third question is, are there any personality traits that don't feel like a fit for your brand? Sometimes it's easier to say, my brand is not serious, and then figure out what the antidote is to that, than it is to figure out what your brand is. So sometimes I like to approach it from, crossing out what doesn't fit to figure out what does fit. And then lastly, a kind of a scale question: how much personality in general do you want to come through in your brand communications? Maybe you offer something that doesn't need a big punch of personality or fun or something like that. Maybe you do want to be more serious. That's something to keep in mind as well as you're coming up with your personality traits and just thinking through how you want to execute on this personality. So for Sipwell, our personality is pretty straightforward. We're cheerful, optimistic, witty, conscientious, curious, and proud. And as you can see, they're just personality traits. It's one word, 5 or 6 of them. You don't really need to elaborate on it much. It's more just to get a sense of a feeling of what is the personality behind this brand. The next element is what I call brand pillars. I would say this is the most important piece of the brand platform. These are the core tenets that drive your company's values, your culture, and ultimately your brand vision. I always use this as a guidebook. So as your brand grows, refer back to these when making a decision on what is true to your brand. If you are to go partner with another brand, does it fit your brand pillars? Does this make sense for your brand? This for me is kind of the guidebook, the playbook for how to make any brand decisions moving forward. And what it looks like, and I'll show you the example for Sipwell, is it looks like a statement of core values. It's, usually 3 or 4 things that are your manifesto, what you believe in as a brand. And how you develop these is you look at that list of equities, you look at your personality, you look at the key themes for your brand, and you try and group them together into the core tenets that represent who you are. So questions to ask yourself before you do this is, can you group together any of your equities into themes? For Sipwell, we had a couple that were, we have a recyclable can, we use sustainable grapes. So sustainability could easily be one of our brand pillars. Do you have a mission statement already or a core philosophy? What problem are you solving with your brand? How do you want your brand to leave an impact? These are all, these are big questions, but hopefully if you've done some of these other elements first, it becomes a little bit easier to distill down how you want to talk about the pillars for your brand. And so here's the example for Sipwell. So our brand pillars, we have 4 of them, and each one is really, it's a short statement or a headline and then a sentence or two to describe it. So the first one is, we're cheerful. We find the bright side always, and we believe there's something worth celebrating every day. Second point is, we're responsible. We're redefining drink responsibly to mean responsible to our bodies in terms of moderation, responsible to the planet, sustainability, and responsible to each other, community. We're inventive. We want to challenge wine industry norms and expand tastes. From putting legit bubbles in a can to delivering straight to your door, we're setting out to change how premium wine can be produced and enjoyed. Last one is, we're approachable. We have no notions of who the wine drinker should be. Our wine, our culture, and our relationship with customers is inclusive, friendly, and welcoming. This is premium wine without the pretense. So you can see that this gives, it sounds like a manifesto, it sounds like core values, and really that's what it is. But these are the things that define who we are as a brand. And so as you start to make decisions for your brand, you go back to this. So for example, our last one is that we're approachable. We want to be inclusive. We want to be welcoming. We probably would never do a super exclusive VIP collectors only club for a release or something because of that. That it's, this helps to kind of give a framework for what makes sense for your brand, what decisions you make as you communicate it. There are 3 more pieces. I promise they'll get they'll get shorter and more concise, and it'll all start to make sense as it all comes together. The next element of this is a positioning statement. So this really is your elevator pitch. So how do you write a paragraph or 2 that sums up everything you are? And the reason why this comes after those other pieces is because you take your brand equities, you make the tone of voice come clear in your personality, you look at your brand pillars, and you put that all together into, what is your elevator pitch, a paragraph or 2 of how you want to talk about your brand. So questions to ask yourself as you're writing your positioning statement is, which of your brand pillars do you want to lead? So typically when I do this exercise, I like to have 1 or 2 brand pillars that are the primary communication, and then the other ones are the support. So which brand pillar is most important in what you're communicating? Again, same with personality. Which 3 personality traits are the strongest for the brand? You want to make sure those are coming through in how you talk. Are you communicating your top 3 to 5 equities? And is your core offering clear in this statement? So as you can see, we're summarizing and we're prioritizing each of the elements before to put it together into one statement. So for Sipwell, positioning statement is, hi, we're Sipwell, premium California wine on a mission to spread cheer. We believe that amidst the rush of our busy lives, there's always a moment worth celebrating. We're bucking centuries of wine industry tradition by canning tasty, bubbly wine and delivering it direct to your door, so we can be there to toast with you. Plus, we're producing sustainable wine in an infinitely recyclable format, so it's better for the earth. Great wine that's good for the planet? Well, cheers to that. The second to last element of a good brand platform is your brand promise. And I mentioned up top, this is really your contract with your customers. So what is the value or belief that the brand's customers will expect across every interaction with your company and with your brand? This is really just, it's a simple statement. It can be a full sentence, it can be a few words, but it's that I brand promise you, customer, you will get X every time you work with me or talk to me or drink my wine. Two key questions here as you're thinking about this is, what sentiment do you want your customer to walk away with every time they interact with your brand? And the second is, what are you ensuring your brand provides 100% of the time? And so for Sipwell, our brand promise is premium California wine with a can-do spirit. So every time a customer meets us, talks to us, tries our wine, looks at the can, this is the sentiment that we want to convey to them to ensure that they will get every single time. And then the last element is the brand essence. This is just a single phrase, 2 to 3 words that just sums up the entire brand. So if you've done this whole exercise, you've created all these elements. Now you're whittling it down into 2 to 3 to 4 words. What does your brand represent in a single phrase? Again, this can be internal, just an internal guide for you, but this often becomes a tagline, especially in the consumer space. As I mentioned, just do it for Nike is a brand essence. So as you're thinking about your essence, the questions you can ask are, if you were to sum up your brand in one catchphrase, what would it be? Is there a catchphrase you're already using? Does that work for the brand? Does it reflect your overall brand positioning and personality if you do have a brand tagline? This also is a good gut check if you go through this exercise of, if you have existing brand elements, are they working? Are they consistent with the positioning that you want to show to the public? And so for Sipwell, our essence, our tagline is wine on the bright side. So it's simple, but it's meant to convey that approachability, that optimism. It reflects the names of our products, the celebratory nature of the products, and the flavor profile. It's bright wine, it should make you happy. So 5 simple words, but that, having gone through that whole brand exercise, this is where we landed for our brand essence. So the question now is, you've gone through all of this, you have this in a Word doc or a Google Sheet or a PowerPoint presentation. The question is, what do you do with all this information? You could just file it away, leave it on the shelf, but as I mentioned, it's a good guidebook to go back to when you are making brand decisions, when you are choosing fonts or you're redesigning a logo. It's also a really helpful document to have when you have employees or you're growing your business. When you're bringing new people in, it's a way to make sure that everyone's on the same page about the brand, how to talk about the brand, and what the brand represents. And I've given just a couple of examples here of, how to think about how to execute your brand once you've done that brand platform. So once you have that document ready, you've got the communications ready. First thing is, go take a look at your social media, take a look at your website. Is your social media presence communicating your brand positioning? Is it coming across in the content? If not, how can you do that? Or maybe write down 2 or 3 things that you want to start doing in your content that reflects your brand or reflects the personality. Second piece of that is the visual element. So, the reason why we do this exercise usually with a new brand before we do any design is because this brand strategy should reflect the visual elements of the brand. So once we came up with wine on the bright side with this positioning, it was clear that we needed cheerful, colorful, bold, packaging and visuals and all of that stuff. And so now is the time, if you have an existing brand, to review your visual brand elements. And if you don't have an existing brand, do this exercise and then create your visual elements to make sure that the visuals are communicating what you want verbally as well. And then the last point I would say is consider every touch point. So every touch point is an opportunity to solidify your brand. And I said, even this presentation, you may not have noticed, but the whole presentation was in our brand colors, our brand fonts, using our imagery. there's things like that, that if you use them consistently over time, it starts to build a brand universe, and really help to tell your story for you. I think the key thing about branding is it doesn't have to be in so many words. There are so many elements that can convey a sensibility, that can give an emotion, that can look a certain way or give you a certain feeling, as long as you're doing them consistently and with a clear point of view of who you want to be. And with that, I will open it up for some questions.
That was amazing. I feel like I have a lot of pages of notes, and I feel like I have a lot of action plans. So you certainly gave me a lot to think about, and there was some chatter in the chat as well, and super helpful. I mean, so many of those questions. And I think also as entrepreneurs, our businesses are just evolving, and sometimes
Yeah.
we forget, right? As our business evolves and our services change, it's like, holy crud, I never changed that on the website. Or again, because we're the CTO and
Right.
we're the person responsible for getting on the website and changing all that language. And so it's just a great reminder as a whole. And I just love really the chronological order and getting you to the point and the brand, the pillars, and really bringing you to the end and the tagline. It was all just super helpful. And is that what you've landed on for the tagline, is wine on the bright side?
Yes, yeah, wine
Yeah.
on the bright side. So that's what we sell wine online. So if you get our mailer box, it's printed right on the box. We use it in our other brand communications. So that's our tagline.
Awesome. So we're going to open it up, and yes, I'd love you to take yourself off mute to ask Hillary your question. I know Mary has a question. Thanks, Deb, for putting that in the chat. Just put me in the chat if you have a question. We'd love to get to everybody.
Heather was first. Heather, can you unmute, or do you want me to read your question in chat?
I can unmute. Thank you. I just noticed as you were going through, and I apologize, I didn't capture exactly what it was, but your brand promise, I believe, was one sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just wondering if that's typical, or if you advise that we come down to, the one thing that we promised our customers, or could we have like a top 3 or something? I know there's hypothetically.
That's a good question. It can be more than one thing. I would hesitate to make it very long, but if you can say you will get A, B, C within a sentence, then I think you're okay. But concise is better, at least for that element of it. But by all means, if you have a couple elements, I'm trying to think of other brands that I've worked on where or I'll give an example, like an energy drink is great tasting and functional. It can be 2 different things, as long as it's someone's going to get it every single time they work with you.
Okay.
So
Thank you. Also, I'm on your website now to try your wine.
and I should mention, I was going to put it up at the end, and I can drop it in the chat, but I am going to give this group, I have a promo code set up just for Ellevate members. So if you want to go buy wine, the promo code is just Ellevate, as you guys spell it, and it will give you 20% off your first order. So
Thank you, Hillary.
Yay, we love coupon codes. Mary, you're up next. Or can you see the chat, Sarah? Because I know you're on your phone.
Yeah, I can. Thank you. But I appreciate the help. I welcome it. Mary.
Thank you. First of all, I'm really thirsty. This has made me really want to try your drink. It looks really delicious. Thank you for sharing all of this information. I have 2 questions for you, which I hope is okay. One is, when you were talking about the pillars for your brand, and that you should take into consideration what you hear from customers over and over again. What do you do when what your customers frequently say to you and what you really want to project as your brand are perhaps not in alignment?
that is a good question. That's definitely happened before. I would say that's normally the reason why a brand would come to me or go to an agency for a rebrand. I think, I would say 2 things to that. I think one, understanding where that gap is. Is that because your brand communications and what you're offering is not clear to the customers? So there's that piece of it. The second element I would say is it might be worth listening to your customers. Perhaps they are seeing a value in what you're offering that you don't see as a strong equity for your brand, or you weren't considering as an equity for your brand. For example, I'll give you an example for Sipwell. Again, it's a consumer example, but our wines are all 0 sugar, and we did not start out marketing it that way. We didn't start out really talking about that or focusing on that. And then as we were doing samplings, as we were doing events and talking through the wine and people asking, is there sugar in this? Are they sweet? When we started realizing that that element of it was valuable for people to hear, we started putting that more on our written communications, talking about it in social media, listing it as an equity in our brand platform, if you will. So I think there's 2 elements. Obviously, you don't want your customers deciding for you what you want to be important, but at the same time, if you're hearing something over and over again that you're solving a need or you're providing a value that you weren't expecting, then perhaps it's worth considering pivoting your brand a little bit or including that in the communications.
That sounds great. Thank you. That was a really clear explanation. If I could ask you, is there time for me to ask one more, Deb, or should I let somebody else go first?
You're good. After you is Tana.
Okay. So my other question is, you were talking about brand personality and giving as an example, like, how would you describe a friend, or like what celebrity would be a good parallel to what you want your brand to be. And then you made a note, and I may not have heard clearly, but something about if you're doing this work for your own personal brand, then you really want to look inward at yourself to come up with what this is. And I wasn't quite sure I was understanding what your directive was for people who are branding themselves personally.
That's good. Yeah, and I'm happy to clarify. Thank you for the question. For me, I would say that your brand's personality should reflect your personality. If you are the brand, if you're building a personal brand, then your personality should come through in the brand. That I think is the most authentic way to communicate who you are and what you're offering, by really reflecting yourself in your larger brand. That might be hard for some people to come up with their own personality traits or to figure out how to map their personality to the brand. But I think that's a situation where maybe ask a trusted friend or two, what do you think are the personality traits that you love from me that you think would work for the brand or what I'm offering. I think it's difficult when it is your personal brand or when you are a face of a brand, because I think it requires a little bit of vulnerability to have those conversations. But I think that's the way that you can create the most authentic brand, is be true to who you are and make sure that comes through.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mary. Tana?
Yeah, so thank you again. I appreciate it's been wonderful listening to all this. Can you give just a few tips on social media branding, like what that might look like?
Yes, good question. I'll give that with the caveat that I'm still working on it myself and always working on it. But I think there's a couple things with social media to think about when you're thinking about branding. And advice that I like to give to other brands, and in my past life I've done this a lot, is take a step back before you're planning out content or posts or anything like that, and just figure out what are the 3 to 4 areas that you want to communicate from a content standpoint. Like, do a little bit of a strategy of 25% of the time I want to be a thought leader, and 25% of the time I want to share customer feedback, and 25% of the time I want to ask a question of my community, or I think plan kind of a structure behind it that fits your brand and what you want to communicate, and then that will help you to plan the content itself. I will say, as an entrepreneur, when you're running a business and trying to do social media and content, that doesn't always happen. It certainly doesn't happen for Sipwall. Most of the time we're just doing it on the fly, but if you have the time to think through at a high level what you want your strategy to be, it'll help to plan your content a lot easier. The couple other considerations I would say in terms of like being true to brand on social media is there's a way to represent it visually. I'm sure you followed Instagram accounts, or maybe you are one, where you have one template that you chose in Canva, or you've got a certain color palette and all of your posts look like that. That's certainly nice to do. I think it makes for a really good looking feed if somebody's scrolling through, but I would prioritize the value of the content over the look of it. And I would prioritize the community building aspect of social media over the one-way posting and communication. I think when you can engage with the community and make it more of a conversation than just a super well-polished post, then that's always more valuable in my mind for a brand than how pretty the picture is or the graphic is.
And I would ask Hillary, as it relates to sort of your website, because we covered a lot and had a lot of questions with a lot of answers. What do you feel? And I know a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with not putting everything on, in the kitchen sink on the website. And so I just wondered if you could give a little bit of guidance on what you think, our thoughts should be surrounding that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I tend to agree with kind of a less is more approach on the website. And as that relates back to the brand platform elements, the one thing I failed to mention is that doing all of that work is meant to be mostly internal. You shouldn't be communicating a lot of those things publicly. You certainly can't. I mean, I think your positioning statement, the fact that that's an elevator pitch, that probably could easily go on your website as a who we are, what we do. If you feel it's important to communicate your brand pillars and have some sort of manifesto, feel free, but I generally view that as an internal guidepost. So, I think there's certain elements of your brand platform you can take to use as copy on your website and as content on your website, but don't just regurgitate all that work if you do all that work in how you communicate. So yeah, I would say, make sure you've got a good elevator pitch online on your website, and then, again, less is more. I think what are the key elements? Going back to that list of equities, making sure all of those equities are communicated. If not all of them, at least the top 3 to 5 of them. And yeah, then make sure as you're writing copy for the website that it's communicated with your personality in mind.
And like you said, like there's other ways to communicate those words other than the words,
other than
right?
Words, right. Is there a photo, whether you have it or a stock photo, that conveys a personality or a sense of who you are? Is there a graphic? Are there icons, rather than just big blocks of text?
Right, because someone said, on your colors that like it makes me feel happy. Like people felt what you were trying to get across. So, certainly, like you said, there's lots of ways to be able to convey messages other than just words.
Yeah.
Let's see. Any other questions for Hillary?
And if not a question, maybe what is a key takeaway from our conversation with Hillary today that you're going to apply to your brand? Love to hear what the learnings were.
I can, if I can jump in, I'll just say this is helpful because I'm currently working with someone to kind of rebrand myself. And one of the big things, I've just been doing this solopreneur thing for a few years and with a gap a little bit because of COVID. And I worked with a branding company up front, and I never really liked my website. And I kept saying, it doesn't sound like me, like it's not my voice, despite the number of conversations we had about it. And I left it because I had this sense that, you know what, it's a company, even though it's me, and I'm selling to big companies and they know what they're doing. So, okay. So it was kind of nice to hear you talk about, you know, like if you're in that position, you are the brand, and bring your personality back, because that's something I'm trying to do now. And it's a little nerve wracking because I do sell to really big companies who are really serious and want, but I'm selling me, you know. And at the end of the day, I think when the sale has gone well, or the engagement has gone well, it's been much less about the stats on my website, you know, and it's been much more about the rapport we build. So I know that in reality, I'm working to connect that to the way I present my brand. So this was really helpful, just hearing that discussion, and from other people on this call as well, just to kind of reiterate that. If anyone else has gone through that and has suggestions on how to, you know, kind of go from, gosh, we built this brand for a company, but we need to undo that now and build it for you. Like build it for the solopreneur, which is very different. I'm happy to have more conversations and take advice. But thank you for that, Hillary. That was helpful.
Heather,
Thanks,
this is
Heather.
Mary. Oh,
Hi, Mary.
Hi, I was just gonna say, Heather, as when you were, I was actually put what you just said into the chat box. And I didn't say it as eloquently as you did, but I was just saying I really love the fact, Hillary, that you reinforced that for us, because I think that is so critically important. And I'm going through this refresh branding exercise right now with a marketing firm, and there's language that felt uncomfortable for me to kind of put out there as far as like the corporate world is concerned, and I live most of my life in the corporate world, but is who I am. And so, you know, what's more important, this perception of what I think of corporate, or representing my truth and who I am and helping people to understand who I am? And, you know, I picked that option and allowed myself to work through some of that discomfort, because you feel a little exposed or a little vulnerable when maybe you're speaking your truth in a way that you haven't said or shared as consistently in the past. But I think the more you do it and the more comfortable you get with it and the more you honor yourself, that is what's going to help your business to be known and successful.
And to Heather's point, they're coming to you for you, right? So for you to actually show up differently would also be really confusing.
Well, I think, and this thought just popped into my head as Mary was speaking, because I also came from the corporate world and I still work, you know, with corporate clients. I thought in the beginning that I was competing against the big firms that do what I do. And now I think I've come to a point where I believe that me being me is the differentiator, is one of my differentiators, and allows me to do things that a big firm can't do. And I don't know if that's true, but that's kind of what I'm hanging my hat on right now.
I love that. Thank you.
Very true. Yeah, that's a great sentiment.
Andrea, did you want to share your insight?
I was just about to put in a chat. I'll go ahead and say it out loud. As a copywriter, for those of you who are at a point where you see the value of Hillary's great insights, this is such a mind-expanding exercise for me as well. And you want to get on a call, a strategy call, to talk about how, like do a website audit, for example, and discuss how your words can clearly express your highest value. That's where I add value as a copywriter. So let me know how I can support you. And I'll put my LinkedIn URL in the chat.
Thank you, Andrea. You know, we have fantastic resources in this community. I'm so glad you brought that up. You know, whether you're launching your business, growing your business, you know, Elizabeth is great at helping you find the right freelancers to grow. So the reason why we connect on LinkedIn is so that you have access to this incredible pool of resources right here in our network. And of course, you should also connect on the LinkedIn, the Ellevate platform in our community too. Make sure that your profile is up to date, that you have your social media handles in your profile. And when you go back to the page, where this event page, you'll see everyone who registered for this event. And so connecting with each other on the Ellevate platform as well is available to you. Does anyone else have an insight to share or a question for Hillary? Yes, go ahead, Melisha.
Melissa, yeah, this was great and was a really good reminder. Makes me want to revisit my branding and be like, okay, it's been, a decade. What do I think? But I will also say that having your branding align with who you are and what you offer, I feel like I don't even have conversations with people that don't already want to work with me because you know who I am before we meet, and it saves a lot of time. So this is great because it makes me want to make sure that that presence is evolving, but I can say it really does streamline your time.
Mm. And also thinking about all those other folks who have yet to know you. If you take that work out and put some of more thought, for me at least, into the social media and into the language on my website, how much more potentially could come in from that. Sorry, I'm trying to look at the chat.
Yeah, so we have two questions. Someone wants a discount code, and Gwen, you want to learn more about choosing colors?
Yeah, just starting to think about branding and colors for branding. And I know certain colors evoke certain feelings, and I'd love to learn more about that. Is there any resources you can share or point me in the direction for that?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say spend some time looking through other visual inspiration. So go on Pinterest or Google. The other thing to think about with color is, do this exercise. What are the emotions? What are the feelings you want to evoke? And in your mind, what colors do that? The last element of it is, if you're in a competitive space or you're in a space that tends to go heavy in one certain color, I'm thinking of like blues for healthcare, maybe there's an opportunity there to pivot or be different or do something that stands out from the rest. It's hard because there's no one size fits all. But for me, it's when I'm doing this, I look for visual inspiration from other categories, from other products that I like, from other, even just design, fashion, and things like that. And then also making sure that the colors match the personality that I set out to describe. Hopefully
that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, you figured out how to save it. So, okay, great. Someone was asking about how to save the chat, which is the 3 dots on the bottom. And then you can save the chat just for folks who are looking to continue. Hopefully everyone's looking to continue the conversations with each other and further connect. Any other thoughts? Anyone wanted to share, or ahas or action steps that people are going to take? I know for me, I'm definitely going to go back to my social, and I love just what are the 3 or 4 messages that you want to make sure that you're continually promoting and continuing to just that consistency. So I know for me, that's an action step I'm definitely going to take. Anyone else have any action steps or ahas that they had that they want to share? Yes. Yes, Beth. Oh, go ahead.
Hi. Sure. I just want to say thank you for that. I think what my biggest takeaway was that it is, it's been broken down into so many different layers. It just showed that there are multiple ways to communicate your brand. It's not just the tagline, just your elevator pitch, and trying to jam everything in one. So I'm looking forward to going through all those steps and seeing that the multiple layers of it, and that it all comes together in the end. So thank you. Very helpful.
Thank you so much. And Hillary, thank you again for being here and sharing all this great information. And I'm sure everyone will be on Sipwell's website ordering their wine, 20% discount using the promo code Ellevate. My fellow chapter leads, anything else we want to leave our wonderful ladies with?
Elizabeth, can you clue us into our program for the 16th of February? So we are off next week. We had a speaker cancel, unfortunately, so we're going to just take that week off. Elizabeth, what's up next?
Yes, thank you. So we've got a session on funding your business. And it's going to be a really interesting session because we're going to present some information about women and women's businesses, the kind of businesses they are, kind of the demographics, as well as, from various surveys, what the most recent priorities are in terms of growing women businesses and how people are basically getting the financial resources, which are quite varied, to really fund a scaling, growing business. And so whether that's working with somebody professionally to do social media or whatever it might be, it requires capital. And some of that capital is also how you spend your time, which is a finite and highly valuable resource. And you want to spend as much of that, actually delivering value to clients. So we're going to talk about all that together. And it's a session that'll be led by me, and we're bringing in Ruchi, who's a financial consultant, but not giving you spreadsheets, but more perspective about funding a business. And we're also bringing in someone outside of Ellevate that is a specialist in lending and knows a lot about banking, SBAs, and all will have a perspective on how we have funded our own businesses, as well as the pros and cons of various choices for funding your business. So hopefully you'll join us.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. And there are so many more funding sources available to you. Just because you're a service-based business and you're not seeking venture capital doesn't mean you can't get help to grow your business. So I'm super excited about that session on the 16th. Take care, everyone. We will, we have 1 minute, Heather.
I should say also, I dropped my email and LinkedIn in the chat. So if anyone does have questions afterward or want to reach out, please connect with me.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. We will see everyone in 2 weeks. And thank you, Simone. Great to see you. So Simone Sloan did make it here today. She's waving. All right, everyone. Have a great 2 weeks. We will see you on getting funding for your business.
Thank you.
And thank you, Sarah, for being our host today.
Thank you. Thanks, Deb. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Hillary.
Bye. Thank you.